So my fundamental connection with horses is the fact that my wife and children are all madly in love with their horses. Sometimes it's not actually that hard for me to believe that they love their horses more than they love me. So really, from that perspective, it was quite a natural progression for me to begin to apply my 20 years experience as an osteopath with humans to horses. I graduated in 2002 from the British School of Osteopathy, London. I gained an honours degree in osteopathic medicine. Shortly after, I relocated to New Zealand, and then as my family began to grow, so did the number of horses in my life. I did learn to ride, but I felt in my heart that my relationship with horses would develop and grow by standing at their side and doing what it is that I love to do. And that is simply to experience the world through touch, finding restrictions and tensions in soft tissue, in body tissue, and releasing them. So over the years I've done many professional development courses, including equine craniosacral therapy and equine massage. But I think really the most significant experience that really helped me transfer and apply my skills with humans to horses was becoming a teacher for the Barral Institute. So the Barral Institute, they provide professional development both internationally and in New Zealand for osteopaths, chiropractors, physios, massage therapists and acupuncturists who are interested in learning how to use visceral, which means organ, or neural, nerve, and vascular, meaning blood vessel manipulation to profoundly affect the function of the musculoskeletal system. My reasoning being is that it actually took a lot of time, effort and dedication to become competent enough in those skills to then be able to teach for the Barral Institute. And as much as my training in osteopathy is really valuable when it comes to assessing and treating horses, it's particular skills that I developed with the Barral, or developed through the Barral Institute, that I find that are really key in helping me understand and become aware of the root cause of problems for any individual, whether that be a horse, human or any other creature. So, and this is the art of feel, and feel is something that I have a sense gives me a common language with horse riders, because essentially you guys experience your horses, your relationship is fundamentally based on feel and touch. In osteopathic and Barral circles, we actually refer to feel as listening. So bear with me and I'll explain why. The term listening is really much more expressive of the mindset you have when you're using educated touch to assess an individual. If I'm looking for something, I generally have to know what it is I'm looking for. I then cast my eyes around my environment until my eye line settles upon the thing that I'm actually looking for. So in this example, my attention is much more narrow and much more blinkered by the focus of my line of sight. But whereas if I'm listening, I'm much more open. I'm receiving information from my entire environment. The sound travels to me. I just need to be open and receptive, and the sound comes into my awareness. And so this is really why we use the terminology listening, the art of listening. So when I first place my hands on a horse, I do it in such a way that I can gather information about their entire body. And more often than not, the area that first comes into my awareness or attracts my attention is the area of the horse's body that's placing the most demand on their system. Then I become more and more specific with my touch, so I can precisely determine what the structure is that's attracting my attention. This is exactly the same way I work with humans. I'll actually place my hands on my human patients to have a feel of their entire body well before I start asking them about their symptoms. And that's really because I want the opportunity to assess their bodies without being biased by their story or their interpretation of their problem. In a nutshell, if you really want to get to the root cause of any problem, it's not the location of the pain that's important, it's what does the body feel like. And by knowing that, that's how you'll understand the different compensatory patterns that are occurring for that individual. When we compensate for stuff in our body, it's usually or most often at the detriment or the cost to musculoskeletal dysfunction. And the more that we have to compensate for, the more compromised musculoskeletal function becomes. And you can have a restriction in any tissue, whether it be muscle, bone, ligament, tendon, joint, nerve, blood vessel, organ, or its fascia. And depending on the importance of that tissue, that will dictate the severity of the compensatory patterns, and it'll dictate how many compensatory patterns you have. And so the more the individual has to compensate for, the more compromised their musculoskeletal function becomes. The more compromised the function becomes, the more predisposed you are to tendon strains, joint inflammation, and other musculoskeletal problems. The next sort of founding principle that I work with, and this is something else that's come through the Barral Institute, is know your anatomy. So it's really important that when you can be really specific with your listening to what it is you're feeling, the more specific you are, the less force you need to create a positive change within the system. And this is why the way that I work is relatively gentle, but you still have very significant effects on the musculoskeletal system. And so by knowing the anatomy of what's underneath your hands, it helps you understand how to orientate your hands to the particular structure you're working with. It also helps you understand how much pressure you need to use to get to the right depth. And it also, if you understand the anatomy of what you're working with, you then have an understanding of how that particular structure prefers to be interfaced with. The next skill really is being able to negotiate through your hands with the tissues to get to a point of release with those restricted tissues. And that really is experience, you know, and that takes a few years, and it really is just getting through the numbers of treating patients, treating humans, treating horses, so you understand and have the feel that you know how to negotiate and stimulate the tissues in such a way that you stimulate the body's own corrective mechanisms to bring about that positive change. Once you've made a release, you generally feel a shift in the body, and then at that point you take your awareness back to the whole individual that you're working with, back to the whole of the horse. And at that point, the thing that comes into your awareness next is the next layer. And so often people don't just have one problem, they don't have one compensatory or strain pattern. We have multiple layers, and being able to work through the layers specifically and feeling them allows you to get the individual to a place of ease and balance.